The big story in Ghana today is that the new Patriotic Party government, after claiming that they will not succumb to an IMF program, has finally done so. Last week, Friday, an announcement came, and apparently you people in cabinet knew that on Thursday, but the rest of the country got to find out on Friday that Ghana has assessed an IMF program. You sit in the cabinet, you are a trade minister. What do you make of this?
Thank you, Paul. Paul, I believe that we need to start this conversation by acknowledging a few fundamental facts. First is that, yes, currently our country is confronted with some very serious economic challenges, which have been primarily occasioned and driven by the combined effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the Russian-Ukraine conflict. So this is a fact that we cannot run away from. Secondly, going to the IMF for support ought not to be seen as a negative policy choice. I believe that the negativity associated with going to the IMF for support has been driven by the political discourse, the rather rancorous political discourse over the years. It doesn't matter whether it is NDC or NPP that is leading that discourse. And I believe that there are certain fundamental issues that need to be discussed dispassionately as a united country, driven by one national objective, rather than us politicizing such very critical issues. Because the real fact is that the IMF is just a global bank. Over about 119 countries have pooled their resources together into the IMF fund. And one of the benefits of being part of this pool is that any time that you want to have the benefit of support, either through a loan facility or some technical assistance support to guide you in the management of your economy, that benefit is available to you because you're part of the shareholders, as it were, of the bank. And so actually not taking advantage of the bank, of the fund, is in itself something that I would say you would be denying yourself of. So there ought not to be any negativity surrounding this. But part of the negativity conversation has also been driven by what is generally perceived to be the conditionalities associated with going for IMF support. The third fact is that over 100 countries out of the 190 member states that drive the bank, the fund, have at one point of time or the other in the last year or two have had to seek some form of IMF support and assistance. So this is not about Ghana. It's about the world and the impact of the COVID pandemic and recently also of the Ukraine conflict. And the fourth point is that the circumstances that would lead a particular country to the IMF for support would differ from another country. So it is clear that what drove the NDC in 2015 to the fund for support is quite different from what has driven the government now to go to the IMF. And I thought that it was important that we acknowledge these fundamental facts that would allow us to have a decent conversation about
but the government has done a U-turn because government said we are not going to IMF. Then a month later they say we are going to IMF. People are worried about that.
Yes, that's part of what we should avoid. Whether it is an MPP official or NDC official that would have given such an opinion at one point or the other, it ought not to be part of our conversation now. If, for example, a particular official makes a judgment at a point in time about whether we'll go to IMF or not, I think it would be appropriate for that particular individual to explain and give a sense of what underpinned that statement. But I am hoping that we can go beyond those political conversations, and focus on the fact that, yes, Ghana has taken a decision to go to the fund. So how do we recalibrate what we have been doing before and ensure that we take advantage of what we are entitled to be able to get us out of the economic dilemma that we find ourselves in. We need to understand this, but maybe...
So you don't agree that
yes.
People say, well, IMF is IMF, NDC IMF, NPP IMF, it's all IMF. It just shows that the economic situation is dire, that the economic situation is terrible, very, very bad. Is that not what it is?
Well, there are different reasons why different countries will go to the IMF. And when you go to the IMF, depending on the challenge that confronts you, which takes you to the IMF, there are different packages of support that is provided by the fund. So, for example, there are countries that go to the IMF for what is generally described as a GRA, a General Reserve Account. Mm-hmm. And that is a non-concessional funding facility that supports countries, low-income countries, when they are facing balance of payment challenges. Then you could also access what is called the growth poverty reduction and growth trust. Poverty reduction and growth trust. Now, that is a concessional lending facility that is also provided to member states of the fund to support the same balance of payment disequilibrium. Mm-hmm. But then there is also another package that is called the Extended Credit Facility. Mm-hmm. And that is the package that the NDC sought in 2015. And that normally is provided to countries that have been facing systematic and protracted balance of payment disequilibrium.
As a result of mismanagement?
Obviously, there will be an element of this mismanagement, except if there are external shocks which are beyond the control of the particular country. But in the case of the NDC in 2015, when they applied for the IMF support facility, it was clear that the economy was in systematic decline, and the figures are quite evident. Mm-hmm. Growth was about 3.4%. Debt to GDP ratio was very high. The budget deficit was also very high. Inflation was around 15.4%. So, in the worsening trajectory that they found themselves, the only option was to go to the IMF. And the package that they sought speaks clearly to the fact that the purpose and the reason for going to the IMF was so serious that it was not just a first aid support that was to be given to them. Because if there's a trajectory of underperformance of the economy, then obviously you need a bigger package to support you. In our case, as I seem to have suggested in my earlier comment, and the data shows clearly that you had an economy, post-COVID economy, that registered a growth rate of 5.4%.
2021, you mean?
2021.
In Ghana?
End-year growth rate.
5.4%.
Higher
Higher than 2016's 3.4.
Yes. But even before then, the more revealing fact about this is that we inherited an economy that was under an IMF program. Now, 2017, within a period of 18 months, we were able to move the economy from 3.4% growth to 8.1% within a period of 18 months. After the first year in office, we were able to exit from the IMF program, I would say creditably. Now, this is significant also because at the time we were exiting, all the economic indicators which were in disequilibrium were pointing in the right direction. Inflation had scaled down from 15.4% to single digits. Likewise, the debt, fiscal debt, and then also the debt to GDP ratio. So these are indicators pointing to a very significant turnaround of the economy, even when the country was in an IMF program. So fast forward, if at the end of 2019, you were registering 7% growth, single-digit inflation, with a budget deficit 5.4%, then obviously this is an economy that was thriving. And even interestingly, whilst we were working ourselves out of the IMF program, we also decided to embark on the transformation of the economy. Because, Paul, the only guarantee against going back and forth to the IMF, which has occurred to this country over 17 times, is to be able to transform structurally your economy such that a number of things happen. That you are able to build very strong reserves with your central bank, that you are able to tame inflation, that you are able to reduce your debt to what we call sustainable limits. And then also to be able to achieve trade surplus, meaning that you are exporting more than you are importing. For the first time in the history of our country, within the first term of office of our government, we're able to achieve a trade surplus. So if by the end of 2019, we had such remarkable results from managing our economy, and then also being able to exit from the IMF. And then all of a sudden, in 2020, your growth rate declines dramatically to 0.5% from an average of 7%. Then obviously, there must have been some external forces that would have contributed to that. And that is why we talk about the fact that what has taken us, the conditions that have taken us to the IMF is entirely different from the conditions that took the NDC in 2015 to the IMF. This was a situation of a systematic decline in the economy, and which was why they required an extended credit facility to be able to support the recovery of the economy. In our case, imagine a situation where you have such remarkable performance to the extent that Ghana becomes the most attractive investment destination in West Africa and second in Africa. So if something happens within a matter of 3 to 6 months, it could only be attributed to circumstances beyond the control of the country. And that is what is explained by the combined effect of the Ukraine war and then the COVID pandemic.